Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we are going to be looking at stocking ideas for a 5.5 gallon tank. Now I know this tank is not very large, and so we're going to be a little bit limited in the number of fish and the types of fish that we can keep in this tank, but I think we can still make it work. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. We do lots of videos just like this. We also look at water parameters, species profiles, fish store, fish room tours. We've got over 60 fish tanks in our fish room. With that many tanks, we've always got something going on. Now before we get into the stocking ideas for the 5.5 gallon, we did do a stocking ideas for a 2.5 gallon. Again, there aren't many options there, but I will put that in the description below as well as in the upper right hand corner, because the fish that can go in a 2.5 gallon can surely go in a 5.5 gallon as well. I would also like to say thank you to Rob from Flip Aquatics for sponsoring this video. A lot of the fish that you see in this video can be found at flipaquatics.com. It's a great place. Highly recommend. Check it out for all your nano fish needs and shrimp. Really cool place. In fact, we did a fish room tour of his warehouse. I will put that in the description below in case you want more information. Hope you enjoy the video. Stay tuned. So I think one of the first fish we think about when we're looking at a smaller tank are the bettas. They are such beautiful fish, so much variety. You see different color patterns, different tail patterns. The finnage can look very different. Can you keep one in a 5.5 gallon? Definitely. We looked at this fish as part of the 2.5 gallon stocking options, and there we're really pressing the minimum limits, but a 5.5 gallon I think a Betta can fit really well in. And again, it's one of those fish where when you're looking at a tank that size, it is the centerpiece fish. It's going to gather a lot of attention. What we're looking at here are Bettas from Flip Aquatics. They are awesome fish, a lot of variety. Now, when it comes to a 5.5 gallon, if you put a Betta in there, are you going to be able to keep other fish in that tank with it? Probably not. We have had some success keeping snails in with our Bettas in smaller tanks, but even that, you're running the risk of maybe not having that work out. So if you're looking for a really pretty, really colorful centerpiece fish, a Betta could certainly be an option in a 5.5 gallon, especially if you are content with having that be the only fish, the superstar in the tank. And here's another fish I absolutely love for a 5.5 gallon tank, and that is the sparkling gourami. Take a look at this fish. It doesn't get very big, so it might get around an inch or so, female slightly smaller. But look at these pretty blue eyes, and they really stand out in a 5.5 gallon tank. We've had them before and really enjoyed them. The one thing I would recommend, it's probably not a good idea to have multiples in a tank that size, at least multiple males, because they can tend to harass one another. But if you're looking for a fish that's got some really beautiful eyes and interesting personality, this would be a great one for a 5.5 gallon. And again, not all the fish that we're talking about in this video go well together, so you'd want to do your research before you start stocking your new tank. And here's another fish I really like, and that is the Ember Tetra. You can see it here. Look at the color on this fish. So this is a nice bright orange. They have a little bit of activity, which is cool. They don't really necessarily school tightly, but they stay small. And again, that's what we're looking for when it comes to a 5.5 gallon tank. We need to find a fish that's going to stay relatively small, and we don't need to keep lots and lots of them together in order to keep them happy. Now, Ember Tetras do prefer to be in groups, but you could do a half dozen in a 5.5 gallon and still not have it look super cramped or anything like that. So looking at these fish, again, the colors are awesome. They're relatively peaceful fish, so maybe it's not the best to keep with something like a Betta, but I like these fish a lot because they stay small and they provide a lot of color to that smaller tank. And I really like this next fish we're going to be looking at. This is the Meera rasbora. Really cool looking fish. It stays tiny. So this is a fish that's going to stay under an inch long. It's got some interesting color, some interesting behavior. And again, because it's so small, it's not going to look like it fills up that 5.5 gallon super fast. Now this is a fish, again, that would prefer to be in small groups, and so you'd want to keep that in mind, maybe get a half a dozen or so. But really cool fish. The other cool thing about this is that they may be somewhat shrimp safe. All fish will pick off babies, but this one probably will leave the adults alone. And of course, who could forget the pea puffer? The pea puffer is a tiny little fish that's going to stay around an inch, maybe slightly less. Now they can be a bit aggressive. They certainly will be aggressive towards one another. They will eat shrimp, they will eat snails, but if you wanted to have a solo one in a 5.5 gallon, that may work provided you choose your tank mates wisely. We've had them in a 5.5 gallon tank with some tetras, and we haven't had any issues with them. They leave each other alone, but these are great fish. They always seem to be looking for their owner. Lots of really cool personality, as you can see here. Love the color patterns, just a really cool fish. Definitely something if you're looking for a fish with personality to add into that smaller tank, this might be the fish for you. But once again, just do your homework, especially with this fish. Make sure that the tank mates you have and the tank that you want to set up is going to give these fish and your other tank inhabitants the best chance for success. The other fish I really like is the Pygmy Cat. They stay relatively small, about an inch or so. They tend to like to be in a small group, so that would be beneficial if you could get 3, 4, or 5, or 6 of them. I've known people who've kept them in large groups of dozens and dozens, but they're goofy fish with a lot of personality, and they're a lot of fun to watch, as you can see here. They spend more time towards the middle and top of the tank than you might think, but really awesome fish. So let's talk a little bit about our cleanup crew for a 5.5 gallon tank. A 5.5 gallon is going to be too small for a lot of the fish that we would normally consider cleanup crew sort of fish, like bristlenose plecos or the average size Cory cat, or even otocinclus that tend to want to be in a much larger group. A 5.5 gallon is going to be a little small. So snails might be a really good option. We're looking at nearite snails here. The nice thing about them is they don't breed in fresh water. If there's a downside to them, it's going to be that they will leave snail eggs that are not going to hatch, but they're going to leave those things on the glass. They may leave them on decorations. You might have to scrape those off, but you can see here there's a lot of variety, really cool patterns, really cool colors, and I think that's one of the reasons why they are so popular. So putting in a nearite snail or two would go a long way in helping keep your 5.5 gallon relatively algae-free. The other option you have are mystery snails, and mystery snails are awesome. This is one of our tanks. We have a breeding 20 long for mystery snails. I really like these. One, you can breed them, so if you're interested in having more of them, it's kind of cool. And in fact, we did a species profile on mystery snails, so you could get much more information. I will put that in the upper right-hand corner as well as in the description below. But they're great little guys for cleaning things up. They get a little larger than the nearite snails, but they're really awesome, and I think you'd enjoy them. So let's go ahead and talk about shrimp. Shrimp could potentially be an option for a 5.5 gallon tank, but there's some things that we have to consider. Now, we've done species profiles on shrimp before. I will put that in the upper right-hand corner as well as in the description below if you want a lot more information on how to keep them successfully. But this is one of those things where you really want to make sure that you're ready for shrimp, that your tank is ready for shrimp. They don't do well in an uncycled tank or a new tank, and it takes a little bit of experience to keep them, although they're certainly not difficult. A lot of the shrimp that you're seeing here, or pretty much all the shrimp that you're seeing here, are from Flip Aquatics, as were most of the fish. Again, if you want more information, I would definitely check out flipaquatics.com as well. But when it comes to shrimp, while they're small enough to fit in a 5.5 gallon tank, shrimp, as well as all living things, they really need stable water parameters. In a 5.5 gallon tank, and this goes for both fish and shrimp and snails, achieving those stable water parameters is a key. And the smaller the tank you have, the more difficult it is to achieve those stable water parameters. I don't really recommend a tank this size for beginners. You'd be much better off getting the largest tank that you can afford and that you're willing to take care of. So maybe stepping up from a 5.5 to a 10 or a 20. That will allow you to have more stable water parameters. That being said, as you can see here, there are lots of really cool types of shrimp. Now, most of the shrimp that we're seeing, at least early on, are Caridina. They require softer water with a lower pH, and so if you live in an area that naturally has those water parameters, you'd be in pretty good shape. The Neocaridina, which is the species profile that I did that's linked in the description below, those shrimp tend to like harder water with a slightly higher pH. And so it really depends on your water parameters which type of shrimp you get. Now, some shrimp can be relatively cheap. Others can be a lot more expensive. If you are just getting into shrimp, and here's a cool little video of a little crab, freshwater crab, that's also an option. But if you're just getting into the shrimp, I highly recommend make sure your tank is cycled, make sure that you're up on water parameters, and make sure that you've been able to achieve relatively stable water parameters before you start adding invertebrates like shrimp that are going to be more sensitive to those water changes. So these are just some options for a 5.5 gallon. It's certainly not an exhaustive list. And once again, you really want to make sure your tank is established before you start adding fish. Make sure that it's fully cycled. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.